Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for a special program commemorating an important and tragic moment in our history. I'm Amy Antonucci. I'm a New Hampshire Peace Action board member, and I'm really glad to welcome you. Again, this is a special Hiroshima Nagasaki remembrance event, and we're going to be welcoming activist and artist Jane Bernhardt with her Hibakusha Peace Project. This program is co-sponsored by New Hampshire Peace Action, Back from the Brink, and 350 New Hampshire. I also want to introduce my co-host for the night, M. Fredericks. M is a recent New Hampshire Peace Action volunteer and also one of the Mother's Day 5, who are going to trial in October for protesting Israel's attacks on Gaza. Hi, Em. Okay, first, we'd like to start with an acknowledgement, a land acknowledgement, and point out that we are doing our work on Nidakina, the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples. We honor with gratitude the land, the waterways, and those people who have been in relationship for so many generations. And now, quick reminder about our Zoom guidelines. We love when you keep your video on, but your audio will be muted to start with. You can use the chat to ask questions, make comments, and later we will do hand raising. And with all that said, I'm now going to invite M to join us and introduce tonight's speaker. You ready, Em?
Yes, thank you. So it's wonderful to be with you all this evening, and an even greater pleasure to introduce Jane Bernhardt, our featured artist for this commemorative event. So Jane Bernhardt is a multifaceted artist who expresses her political and spiritual beliefs in her work. She combines skills in acting and portraiture that really puts a face to issues of our time, from the Cold War to food insecurity and homelessness, to civil disobedience, genocide, and nuclear weapons. And the work we will hear about tonight features Jane's portraits of Hiroshima survivors she met in Japan, known locally as Hibakusha. The Hibakusha Peace Project was created with the hope that if people could put a face to this suffering, they'd find it harder to tolerate the proliferation of nuclear weapons. So we will now hear from Jane, and then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A, and you'll be able to either unmute or put questions in the chat at that time, or you can certainly add questions as you think of them into the chat. Please join me now in giving a warm welcome to activist and artist Jane Bernhardt and the Hibakusha Peace Project.
Hello. Hello, everybody. I see Anne. It has been quite a journey for me getting here this time. Over 20 years ago, I traveled to Hiroshima to really connect with this incredibly horrible thing and share that firsthand experience with as many people as possible. So we created a performance piece and a visual exhibit, and here we are. It's been hard for me as no doubt it's hard for you to put our ears close, our hearts close to this absolute devastation. And interestingly, the very thing that prompted my first trip to Japan was a news report about a new generation of nukes. And as fortune would have it, or luck would have it, that's exactly what happened this time, although the nukes they speak of are much more powerful, much more deadly. So I offer this in the hope that really taking it in will, as painful as it is, will enable us to take strong stands. So I invite you to enter into my experiences in Hiroshima. And thanks to everybody involved. I'm going to read for a little bit. The inspiration for the Hibakusha Peace Project began in spring of 2003 as I was learning about the deployment of new tactical nuclear weapons. And so I go into my background. In portraiture, I have tried to convey the essential spirit of each individual, and I've created exhibits around faces of the enemy, faces of resistance, faces of those marginalized by our society. And it occurred to me that I wanted to create a series of portraits of the Hibakusha nuclear bomb survivors, paired with some of their personal stories, which are hard to hear. So if at any time you need to step back, do. In a sense, we sort of have to own it to get it. And I thank you for all the people who've suddenly appeared here. Hello, hello. This work of this exhibit is dedicated to the Hibakusha of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the same hope that has inspired many of them to travel the world with their stories. That their nightmares never be repeated ever again. May our children's children read with disbelief this dark chapter in human history. Weeks before my trip to Hiroshima, well, I'll say that things started to happen. I had spoken with a few people who gave me some ins on where to stay in Hiroshima and so forth. And somehow out of the blue, a package arrived from a Japanese peace organization containing not only a history of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, but great, big, huge black and white pictures, photographs taken in the days and weeks after the bombings. And so I'm going to show you a couple of these. This one is called After the Blast. So this I did not do in person. This is something that came as a photograph, and the rest you'll see as people I met. When I saw some of these faces, I realized that it is important to ground an exhibit in these memories, these incredible memories. Nuclear Madonna, I call this one. Are you all seeing them? Wonderful. Okay. I don't know. And you can. Hiromu Morishita is, oh well, was a lovely man, a poet, and someone who has had a big presence at the Peace building, where we have a home for people from different areas, and lots of Americans come through and people from all over. And I'm going to read you the personal story of Hiromu Morishita, who, as I say, was a lovely presence at the Peace Center, a gentle man, a man deeply affected and wounded by the events of the bombings in Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Here is his personal story. August 6, 1945 began as a fine day. The sun was shining before the explosion, but then the sun stopped. The A-bomb went off, and I felt just like I was thrown into a big, huge fire furnace. I fell down on the ground. Already my face was burned, like a mask peeling down. My face and hands, my clothes were burning. If I hadn't worked to take off my clothes, maybe I would have died. About that time, I was standing on the ground with about 50 of my classmates. We didn't know another 69 were dead, or how they died, or how they jumped, or were thrown, or crawled into the river. The sky was so cloudy. Then I slowly climbed up a mountain and looked down on the city. I couldn't believe it, wondering what was happening. I felt as if I had landed in another world. At that time, I met a group of soldiers. They were young men. Coming towards me, all the soldiers were burned. Their hands hung like ghosts. I tried to reach my house. I tried to cross over the bridge to the place where it was, but the fire was so hot, I had to go another way. I saw so many people, dead people, burned people. The dead bodies were floating in the river, just like dead fish, and black bodies burned. I went to Hiroshima Station, burned and covered with black smoke. So many wounded people were there. I hoped to get treatment, but I could not. My face was swollen, my eye was closed, so I couldn't see. My hands were burned. I walked slowly, slowly. At last I found my house, but already it had burned. The next day, I hear from my father that my mother had died in the house, crushed, and I was wondering how I would live. And next, another beautiful volunteer at the Peace Center, Fumiko Sora. I'm sharing with you her personal story around the bombings. And I want to say, anytime you want to step back, do. This is so hard. She writes, August 6, 1945, I was working as a mobilized student in a munitions factory. At 8:15, I saw a yellow flash followed by roaring sound. I thought, bomb, I need to run away. The moment I turned to run, pieces of slate showered onto my head, and blue sky was suddenly there instead of ceiling. After a long time, a friend helped me out from under the debris. Blood-covered people were running around screaming, others lying still, pink flesh exposed, their arms and legs stretched like dolls. I was also injured. A first aid station treated my bleeding head and face and arms with only a triangle bandage. After that, we ran around in the scorching sun, frightened by the metallic humming of military airplanes. Finally, we took refuge in an air raid shelter. where I was feeling severe pain. I laid still and soon fell asleep. I was awakened by the voice of my father. After hearing the blast, he immediately left our country home 20 kilometers away to search for me and my younger brother. As he neared Hiroshima, he saw a boy staggering with a head like a gray balloon. Barely recognizable, it was my brother, badly burned in his face, hands, and legs. Let me tell you some other things that hit my family after August 6th. Dysentery became rampant. 2 brothers and my baby sister were hospitalized. My sister died in the beginning of September. After enduring much pain, I was told that I would be blind in my left eye. The A-bomb also caused suffering to those who entered Hiroshima afterwards. My father suffered from A-bomb disease because of exposure to secondary radiation. A neighborhood man who was in Hiroshima August 6th escaped injury from the blast, but died at the end of August because he had been soaked in the black rain. I'm just going to give us a minute to breathe and know that these people, if you do believe in the continuation of life in afterlife, and this is what comforts me, what consoles me, they do travel on. Toshi Suetomo. I got married at the age of 31 and in the next year was exposed to the A-bomb. On August 6, 1945, I was walking near the Hiroshima station on my way to visit my grandmother's place. Then at 8:15, I saw a flash and heard a roar, but I seemed to have no burns, so I ran directly to my grandmother's house. That night, I looked down the hill beside the house to see the whole city burning in a sea of flames. The next day, I went back to my own home, but everything was burned out. Nothing was left. My husband and I survived, but I lost my brothers, who had a total of 9 children. I took care of some of the children, including a baby who could not walk until the age of 4 because of malnutrition and died at 31 from the bomb's effects. There was very little food and medicine, and I sold my Japanese kimono to buy some rice. My sister was also exposed to the bomb. Her whole body was pierced with shattered glass, but there were no doctors or medicine to care for her. Her injured parts were crawling with maggots. She died that September. I saw many bodies caught among the pillars of bridges because so many burnt people jumped into the rivers seeking water and drowned, hundreds and hundreds of them. I saw horses, cats, and dogs also drowned in the clogged rivers because so many young men were fighting in the war. Only children, women, and old people were in the city. And they lifted up the bodies from the rivers and cremated them. That was horrible. I can still remember the hundreds of people who were walking in the city with their arms outstretched in front of them, their burnt skin hanging off their arms like rags. Other survivors staying here are still suffering from the bomb's effects after 58 years. I believe all people should know and understand the horrors of the A-bomb. Is this what comes next here? Okay. I have some portraits of people whose names I didn't get. We didn't speak the same language. I was very lucky to have a translator for many of the personal stories. So this lady told me her story, but I didn't write it down. I don't have it, so we can go on. And then I saw this man at the Hiroshima museum and just wanted to capture his face so we can go on. One of the days after meeting and drawing Hibakusha at the Hiroshima Peace Center, I returned to my host's home and was handed a headline from August 4th, 2003, New York Times, which read, U.S. presses program for new atom bombs. And I began this rugged piece. It was all more than I could bear, as you can imagine. U.S. presses program for new atom bombs. And that's happening again now. I heard it on the radio. Kieko Murakami was a younger woman at the time of the bombings, and she writes of her story. On the morning of August 6, 1945, we heard the sound of bombers. My father told my younger brother and I we should go into the air raid shelter. As soon as we entered the shelter, we felt sick. Many A-bomb survivors saw a flash and heard a sound, but we could not see or hear either one. My father called to us, and he was a little bit late to enter, so one side of his body was still outside, and he was severely burnt on that side. We slowly climbed out of the rubble. Then my mother emerged from under the debris, hugging my baby sister. My mother was covered with hundreds of glass fragments. 2 very big fragments were embedded in her face. Her right eyeball was coming out, and a big glass fragment was embedded in her left eye. My house was approximately 1.7 kilometers from the bomb hypocenter. It was destroyed, as were all the neighboring houses. We never imagined that the whole of Hiroshima city was destroyed. We had to walk toward a river 300 meters away. I carried my baby sister on my back and held my younger brother's hand. My father carried my mother over his good shoulder. My baby sister was covered with my mother's blood, and my father thought his daughter had died. He thought it was very hard for me to carry her. My father began to wash her with water from the river, and at that moment my baby sister cried. We were very glad to hear her voice. We went to my grandfather's house 5 days after the bombing. We walked many, many miles. There were no roads. Everything was debris. We walked very carefully, not to step on dead bodies. But I happened to step on dead bodies, and I felt very bad. Whenever summer comes, I feel very bad under my feet, even now. And here is a poem. Tread lightly, please. This whole town by the river, where many new buildings now stand, was once long ago one big graveyard. Under this road, where many cars now pass, was once a little boy who crouched on the ground all day, his heart broken, recalling his mother who died, infested with maggots and burned. So I ask you who now tread the streets of Hiroshima, please tread lightly. Walk with care, I beseech you. For even now, many who were badly burned still lie in hospitals. Even now, Suddenly, somewhere, a strange-looking person with crooked fingers, hiding an irregular twitch in the face, with dark black hair, may be dying right this minute. So I ask you, all who visit the city of Hiroshima, when you walk the streets here, please tread lightly. Walk with care, I beseech you, please. This is a poem by Junichi Mizuno. I almost want to give us just a little breather. Are you okay? Suzuko no Mata. Suzuko no Mata had just arrived at her place at work when the blast went off. She found herself under tons of rubble as the building collapsed around her. She was one of the few who survived, but because there were so many casualties and so few medical attendants, she lay untreated for 3 days. Consequently, she lost her leg. Shortly after the bombing, she learned that her fiancé had been killed in a South Seas battle. She says, "I've often thought of suicide. I had dreams and hopes. I wanted to be a beautiful bride, to bear children and be a good mother. But my fiancé died and one of my legs was amputated. I was a young woman, only 21, so I thought there was nothing to do but take my own life. Just as I had this thought, I would think of the aogiri trees and the slender twigs growing out of the damaged trunks. There were 3 beautiful aogiri trees, also known as umbrella trees, that grew outside of her workplace. She often had lunch under the protection of these trees. Suzuko and the aogiri trees were bombed together. Both hold the scars of 20th century war. Every New Year's Day, she visits the aogiri trees. Let's survive another year together, doing the best we can, she says, as she pours a little sacred sake on their roots. The incinerated trees, held with props, and the figure of Suzuko on her crutches merge into a single image. She is a positive warrior, I think. When Suzuko, who tells her A-bomb experience to students, she always does so in front of the aogiri trees. She tells the children, the aogiri trees were bombed just like me, but scarred as they are, they have survived, concentrating all their energies on the struggle to live. As long as she has the strength to continue, Suzuko will be found telling her story to a group of children propped on her crutches and under the trees, whose noble spirit gave her strength and courage to choose life.
And Jane, if you would maybe have a moment for a breather. I think some people would like just a moment to sit with the power of the stories that you've been sharing and
Sure,
images that
sure. It's
accompany.
coming into a lighter vein.
Maybe if people would like to share some thoughts in the chat, they're welcome to. If they'd like that space, we could take that time now, and maybe the rest of us can just take kind of a collective breath for a minute or so before Jane goes on. And then we will have some time, of course, at the end for reflection and for sharing, as well as for questions.
It's all uphill from here. I tell you.
But it's good to hold this space. So I'll be silent now, but we'll give folks a little moment in the chat, and then when you feel like it's time, Jane, go ahead and, please continue.
Can I go on? Yeah? Okay. This is the woman with koto, I call her. She was in one of the, at that time, there were a great number of nursing centers for Hibakusha. And I was able to go and have the stories from them, but also just, find them in their rooms in their off times. And I was in one ear being told the story of one woman who was sitting at table with me. I had a translator. And then this woman walked into the room and unpacked her koto, which is kind of ancient, precious instrument. And so I was kind of distracted because I'm hearing the story, and I'm feeling this music that comes from sort of ancient, beautiful times. So when I did her portrait, which had to be taken from a photo because I was working on another one, I felt that there was something very beautiful she was sharing with us, that her music was angelic. And I wrote, "This is what woman with koto knows. There are times when you cannot prevent the crisis, when you cannot prevent the devastation. And yet she sings. What is this song she sings?" I don't know if you all ever heard of the Hiroshima maidens, but there's a man who lived near me in Connecticut who spearheaded Norman Cousins, and there's a big statue of him in Hiroshima. He and others decided to help disfigured women of marriageable age, to bring them to the US or someplace else where they could get treatment and not be so scarred in their faces and actually have, a life with a lover and child. Michiko Yamaoka, one of the Hiroshima maidens. So I was in a room doing this portrait, and it was a room full of other people. And towards the end, I was still working busily. A beautiful young Japanese girl, came up to me and started asking about about these portraits, about this portrait. And somehow, I'll read you what I wrote. Kumika approached me after the talk to inquire about the portrait. As we began to speak, somehow the pain surfaced in both of us. I have never seen such sorrow and compassion on anyone's face. She looked into my eyes, her eyes pink and wet with tears. It was as if she were drawing from some ancient source the darkness from my soul. She did not stop crying or looking into my face, and I was crying also. I found the pain coming in waves. I really cannot describe the encounter. We stood crying and holding each other with inexplicable holy tenderness for so long. So here is the transformative energy in Hiroshima. God has taken the form of a beautiful young Japanese woman and lifted me from the depths. This then is where the hope lies. And I say God tentatively. We all have a way of expressing the inexpressible. We stood crying and holding each other with inexplicable holy tenderness for so long. So here is the transformative energy in Hiroshima. The divine has taken the form of a beautiful young Japanese woman and lifted me from the depths. This then is where the hope lies. The divine in us, reaching through us. I will never forget you, she said. Once home and with the artwork completed, I brought the exhibit with accompanying stories to many venues, including church halls, schools, conferences, universities. In fact, in Boston, I met Mayor Akiba of Hiroshima, who was really lovely and standing beside me, as you can see, with the pictures, recognizing some of the uh, survivors in the portraits. And then indeed, I was walking with another group at a disarmament conference. Many powerful things can grow out of such horror. So maybe this is we also had for quite a while multimedia performances with a beautiful Japanese dancer and music and so forth. It traveled quite a bit, and that was 22 years ago. So some of these people are still alive. Is there one more? So we will say goodbye to Suzuko, who was an A-bomb survivor from the nursing home. I walked by her room in one of the retirement centers, and I just saw that little face. And I was smitten, and I walked into her room, saying hello. She didn't speak English. We smiled at each other. Somehow there's a name on there. I'm not entirely sure it's the right one, but I just loved her so much. And I felt, there's a spirit. There's a spirit in all of us that's eternal and quite lovely. So let's talk. Oh, I want to read one more. It's a short one. Philip Berrigan. I guess most of us are old enough to know about the Berrigan brothers. He says, I die with the conviction that nuclear weapons are the scourge of the earth. To mine for them, to manufacture them, to deploy them, to use them is a curse against God, the human family, and the earth itself. So I believe we have time. I don't know how the time is. Yeah. So jump in, say what you feel. This exhibit, is looking for a permanent home, by the way.
And so we'll open up now if anyone would like to share thoughts or ask questions. Please raise a hand in Zoom and we can help you to unmute. Or if you prefer to write them in the chat, you can also do that. We'd love to open the space now for any comments, reflections, and for any questions that people may have of Jane. We did hear some thoughts already from Barbara. Thank you for sharing your beautiful portraits and the accounts of survivors. You were so brave to do this. And we heard some admirations for specific pieces with the blue from Dee. And a comment from Robin that this is very evocative of a presentation that Robin heard at the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum in 2004. And it's hard to believe that we are close to this point again. And I see a couple of participants have raised hands, so
I can unmute them. Before that, I just wanted to let folks know, those of you who come to our Monday night conversations that are just an hour, this program is actually going till what would that be, 8:30. So we have plenty of time, just to reassure you. And here we go.
Hi, I'm Mark Roost, and I was born in Japan, and I have 2 pairs of sake jars from Nagasaki that my parents got when they visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki before settling in for military government. And it did occur to me, my mom helped set up a Sister Cities program between San Jose and Okayama, Japan. And I was thinking that might be a good place for home for the collection, but then I heard about the Hiroshima Museum, and a museum might be an even better place. And then another piece to that would be to digitize them and make them available online as a collection as well. Like this will be, but this may be only a portion of the collection, but
That's right. Thank you. Those are wonderful ideas. I'm open to all.
yeah.
Thank you.
thank you, Mark. And I think we all, are feeling the power of the narratives that have been shared and the illustrations that have been shared. And I see that that Michael would also like to contribute something.
Well, mine is mostly a puzzlement, something I don't really understand. So when I look at World War II and all the bombing, I know we were trying to kill Japanese people because we were at war. And it seems like often people don't talk about the other people that were bombed or killed because they weren't killed by the proper kind of bomb, because it wasn't a nuclear and atomic bomb. But on August 14th, after Nagasaki, was the largest bombing mission that was done, and it was done in numerous cities, and it was done with over 1,000 bombers if you include the planes that refuel the bombers. So 839 bombers plus numerous refueling planes. And that was like 5 days after Nagasaki, which was August 9th. But the victims of those bombings are not talked about. It's like, oh, well, we were trying to kill Japanese anyway. They just died, right? And it's always puzzles me. It seems to me like we should have a way to lament the suffering of all the people that died by any of the bombs, not just the kind of bomb that we think are so horribly wrong. So I don't know if that's a question, but my question is, why are we so oblivious to the suffering of the people that weren't killed by the proper kind of bomb?
Yeah. That's a very interesting question. Yeah. Thank you. I don't know if people have anything to respond to that, but to agree.
And I think the mission of New Hampshire Peace Action very much aligns with that. But it is a really interesting question to keep exploring in our hearts as we think about, how we commemorate events like this, and the work as well with our partner organization Back from the Brink, and when do we need to, when does it make sense to emphasize nuclear as a particular kind of threat, and when do we really need to acknowledge and bring people's attention back to the widespread unnecessary suffering that the engines of war bring down upon people. I see another hand raised from Moji or Mohi Agha. I apologize if I'm not getting your name right.
That's okay. I am Moji, and Sister Amy and other folks at the New Hampshire Peace Action know me well. And as I said, I have family in Natanz, Iran, the site of Iran's so-called nuclear weapons enrichment facility. Therefore, it is #1 target of Israeli nuclear bombs, has been threatened numerous times. And I have family, lots of family there. So just hearing some of the horrors that I thank you for sharing. As a psychologist and cultural psychologist also, I have lots of thoughts to share regarding why we don't care sufficiently. One of them is our lower brain has been conditioned for survival in terms of accepting us versus other. And so we have, for example, on October 8, 2023, the Israeli defense minister saying that Palestinians are animals. And that's what happened also in the papal bull that is called the Doctrine of Discovery in 1490s. So this is something that is embedded in our lower consciousness. Therefore, we care about the suffering of those people who are us, who look like us, and don't care about people who are other. So that's one thought. In terms of what I do, I am creating chambers of compassion so that we as peace activists, environmental activists, human rights activists, social justice activists, democracy activists can work together a heck of a lot more effectively in the same way that corporations have chambers of commerce. So we have chambers of compassion. So far, 8 of them have been created as a result of the speaking tour that Sister Amy is well aware of. And I would love to have a chamber of compassion or intersectional circle in New Hampshire. So I'll send this blurb, too long perhaps. But that's, I mean, I am at one level, I'm tired of every year around this time to come to commemorate the genocidal bombing of Japan and fearing what may happen to Iran. And so anyhow, thank you for doing this. New Hampshire Peace Action, and also Sister Jane and Sister M. I'll send this in chat.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate your words.
Em, would you like me to? Oh, there you go. You got your.
We also have another question or comment from Dee.
Hi, everyone. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a lot to feel. I think the first thing I want to say is just, I want to honor all of us who are here. I want to say that everybody who's here and came to this and felt so inclined to spend their time and are still here and are still sitting here listening, because that's a really rare thing. There's so many people that are quick to turn back to their lives and whatever pastimes and, interests and hobbies that they have. And there is so much happening that needs this kind of attention. And I just really want to thank everyone who's here, because it's very important. That's the first thing. And next, I want to honor you, Jane, because this art, my parents are both visual artists, and this art is so beautiful. And as I'm looking at it, I can feel like the spirit and the soul of the person glowing around them and coming forward through the screen. And it's so beautiful. And you have done such a huge honor to their souls. And it's really a gift to receive it. And I'm sitting here torn between like being in so much pain over it and also being so grateful and so moved that their stories are existing and people are hearing them because of your work and your reading also, and your speech about them. The way that you speak about it is its own art. It's not, because there are a lot of artists that make art, but then they are shy about how they talk about it. That's my own family. But the way you speak about it is with such activism, and it's amazing. So thank you so much for doing what you do. I'm trying to cram all the thoughts I have in. The other thing I wanted to say is the response to, I don't know the name of who was speaking earlier about the secondary bombing, not secondary, but, other bombing that was not the nuclear bombing. I just wanted to speak a thought related to that, which is that, it actually kind of makes me think right now of the attention that Gaza is getting in Palestine over Sudan and Congo and Haiti and so many places where genocide goes on and has been for years before October 7th. Congo has been being raped of everything, and people being tortured for so long and no attention. And I just want to say, I don't know if there's exactly rhyme or reason to why that is, but it makes me think that there's just so many levels of ignorance that are going on at once. And what draws attention is the most spectacular headline. And so nuclear bombs are, particularly headlining, as opposed to not that. And I think that to me is maybe the main reason why these other stories don't get that attention. The same with these other genocides. Why did they not get attention? The attention is going to something that has I don't know, it's more sparkly, or not sparkly, that's a terrible thing to say, but you know what I mean, draws attention. So that was a thought I was having. I just thought to share. And the last thing I want to just say is a prayer, because I feel like it's very rare that I get to be part of a group where I get to say this, but I'm scared, and I can't stop hoping. That's the thing that, Jane, that you are displaying, that you are demonstrating, which is how to keep going and making art and hoping and believing that for some reason, even though it looks really bleak, that we can't stop. And clearly you were inspired by many of the people you spoke to because that's what they were doing. That's what they did. The woman with the amputated leg, so many. Okay, I'll wrap it up. I get really moved and emotional by these things and overwhelmed, but just again, thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Jane. Thank you for the organizers, all of you that are running this. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. I am resonating with the pain, actually. Paul over here can tell you I wept because these pictures had been all in storage for like 20 years. And Emily knows, we went through like at least one full roll of toilet paper. I mean, this is so powerful. And I guess, one thing we can do is to keep feeling. But there's a way forward. I do believe that. Thank you so much for sharing these deep and heartfelt feelings that we all have and need to have.
We have one more hand from David Boris, who would also like to add something.
Hi. Well, look, I joined late and I actually have to leave early, but I did want to be able to thank you for putting in the time and effort and drawing this together. It's really important. I don't have it at my fingertips, so I can't drop in the chat the email that we sent out from Chicago Area Peace Action today about why it's important to keep honoring August 6th through 9th. I wanted to say two quick things. One, on the concept of the other, and tangentially saying the quiet part out loud. There's a book called Unhumans. You should take a quick peek at it. It's frightening and disturbing. It utilizes the same language that they used in Rwanda, the cockroaches, that they used in Germany in the 30s, mud people. It's very disturbing, and we should certainly be aware of it so that we understand who the perpetrators of this ideology are and what they're preaching. But I wanted to address the question of the bombings, both after the atomic bombs and particularly the fire bombings in Tokyo, the fire bombing in Dresden, right? The idea that it isn't nuclear weapons alone, right? That we need to be working against eliminating all war. But I don't want there's not an equivalency. And I think it's important that we don't take that thought and say, well, we have to wrap up all of our nuclear weapons abolition work within our overall anti-war work. Because nuclear weapons singularly, right? They have, Jonathan Schell said 20 years ago, the two existential threats, this is probably not anything new to the people on this call, the two existential threats facing the Earth and all 8 billion of the current population are catastrophic climate disruption and nuclear annihilation. And catastrophic climate destruction will come if we don't arrest it, but we can see the early stages of it and we can make efforts to stop it. In The Fog of War, McNamara early is discussing war. And in war, he says, mistakes are made. And when mistakes are made, a lot of people die. And the lesson used to be in war, don't make the same mistake twice. Generals are taught, don't make the same mistake twice. And then he goes on to say, but in nuclear war, there's no opportunity to not make the same mistake twice. And so it makes them a singularly important conversation to put additional effort into, beginning with stopping the Sentinel missile, beginning with calling for the eradication of the land-based leg of the nuclear arsenal, which is the singularly most dangerous leg of the three, and to call for the total abolition of nuclear weapons as a separate argument from the abolition of war from the planet.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Your thoughts and ideas are appreciated. Thank you.
We have another question from Mark Roast.
Sorry, you unmuted and I muted by accident. We marked it there. Oh, Mark, can you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. So I'm responding to David, and there's a Quaker saying that if everybody has enough to eat, the warlords won't be able to recruit. And that doesn't address, it may seem like it doesn't address the nation state like the US, the empire, but it does, because if we like, let's say that, or if the AI and the other things wind up enforcing a universal basic income and we do that right, then we heal people and we no longer have masses of 40% of the population willing to vote for Trump, because they get out from under that entire psychology. And the global warming and nuclear aren't just aligned because they are potential end of life, but they're also aligned because the full use of the solutions to global warming will also pave the way for healing the rest of the economies and the rest of publics. It'll open barn doors that we didn't know were there, and that's what I'm involved in.
Thank you. Thank you. Seemed like there was somebody trying to come in up above.
I think we've just admitted them. I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this time. So I think that does, though, bring us to the
You've
question.
got Amy hand raised.
Ah.
I know I can unmute myself, but I was just trying to be orderly. I wanted to let folks know that I put something in the chat that you can sign around stopping Sentinel, which is a particularly dangerous new weapon system, that they're about to sink a bunch of money to in the US. I think it is particularly poignant. I mean, Jane's, both when, she was working on this project, hearing that the US was committing to a whole new generation of nuclear weapons. And I mean, that's where we've been for ever since then. And it is even harder to listen to pay attention to this, knowing that that is where we're at, that our leaders think, so-called leaders think that it's a great idea to develop, put all our resources, or so many of our resources, into more of this. I do want to give some action items here, some ways that you can act, particularly pointing out our partner Back from the Brink, which is I think it's a Union of Concerned Scientists project, and a good friend of ours, Jeremy Love, who lives in New Hampshire and works with Peace Action as well, is one of the folks that works on that project. And I'll share some resources because they have some great things that we can do right now. And I'll give you a few of those here. They suggest asking your mayor, governor, your city, town councilors, your state senators, your representatives, your county commissioners, anyone, to issue a proclamation or statement about the commemoration of this time period, and also the wish to end the threat of nuclear weapons. And you can also ask them to post something on social media about that. And there's also what is it? Let's see, the Cranes for Our Future project being sponsored by the Nuclear Threat Initiative. I'll put a link for that. So these are ways that you can do something. And of course, groups like Peace Action and Back from the Brink and the Campaign for Peace Disarmament, CPDS. Joseph Gerson's wonderful group. Peace Disarmament and something else. Sorry, I'm going to look that up and get that to you. Are working really hard. There have been some amazing programs lately. I'm sure that it's recorded somewhere that you can find. One that we went to was called Debunking Deterrence. And I'll tell you, it was really fascinating because this is one of the main things that people tell us, right? We have to have nuclear weapons to deter against other nations having them. And it really asked some questions about that. So I really hope that folks will follow up and get involved. And I do also want to speak to what Michael asked. First, I just want to say, thank you, Michael, for asking it, because it's a really rich question and has generated a lot of really interesting conversation, and that's so important. I speaking mostly for me, but sort of for Peace Action too, and why we always honor this. First, I don't think it's either or. I think our culture has a lot of either or thinking, and there's really the honoring of one terrible moment is not to say we don't honor the others. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's so many problems that we don't really necessarily want to be, this would be a full-time job. Every day we'd have something to commemorate. I look forward, though, to the day we have enough peace activists to address every single one of the things that come up. to a large extent, what we focus on Peace Action is what the stakes are, as has already been talked about, where we might have leverage, and particularly what the US is involved in. We want our work to be effective, and those are some reasons that we focus there. And I do want to say that I completely agree, Michael. I think every bomb dropped is wrong, and every leader that orders a bomb dropped should go to The Hague to be judged. I think it's way too late in our, there's just way too much at stake for us to allow any of that. So just a few thoughts I wanted to share. And again, particularly to urge you to get involved and join us in doing this work. I don't think I got Jeremy's. Yeah, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to Jeremy Love.
Jeremy's information is in the chat, as well as the information that Amy had just shared about the Cranes for Our Future project and Prevent Nuclear War, bringing a proclamation before your local representatives.
And I know many of you are involved in that. In fact, who here has been involved in passing a Back from the Brink resolution in their town? Bill, you can put your hand up for Sandra. So I know a lot of us are involved in that, and thank you for that important work. And back to you, Em.
I want to just say thank you again to Jane for sharing this incredible work and spending time with us all this evening to share these incredibly powerful stories and the visual art that really brings them to life. We will get Jane's website again in the chat for folks who might want to reach out, or if anyone thinks down the road of ideas for a permanent home for this powerful collection. We also had people joining us quite recently, so I want to let folks know that we will be putting this on our YouTube channel. So that's New Hampshire Peace Action, which you can access from our homepage. So if anyone missed parts of the presentation, you will be able to find the entire thing there, as well as to check out some of the stills of portraits on Jane's website. So there's the YouTube channel in the chat, and we will add Jane's website into the chat in just a moment as well. Also want to thank Back from the Brink and 350 New Hampshire, our co-sponsors, and to let folks know how you can stay in touch in the future. So we will be adding New Hampshire Peace Action's website, 350NH's website, and Back from the Brink are all in the chat for anyone who'd like to know that. For upcoming events, our next in-person events are the continuation of our Ceasefire Now vigils. They happen every Wednesday in Dover, and that alternates between Senator Shaheen and Representative Pappas's office. This week, tomorrow, we will be at Shaheen's office, and every Thursday as well in Concord at City Plaza. Back to online, some upcoming events for online. On Sunday, it's coming Sunday, August 11th at 1 p.m. We have a talk on Gaza, international law, and the state of U.S. democracy. And that is with former UN Special Rapporteur and law professor Richard Falk. So that should be a really informative webinar. Then on next Monday at 7 p.m., August 12th, we have a conversation about joint Israeli-Palestinian organizations that are still persistently working for peace, even at this time of intense conflict. And that is with Shiri Orion and Beth Shumu, who are joining us for that. And then the following Monday, or 2 weeks from that date, on August 26th at 7 p.m. We have a conversation again on nuclear weapons about citizen diplomacy for nuclear disarmament. And that is with Dr. Hirokazu Miyazaki. This is what happens when you're trying to both speak into the camera and read from notes. But some great events ahead. And of course, the entire series is free and open to everyone. But it, of course, means a lot to have your support. And if you'd like to donate to help sustain these series, then the link for that is in the chat as well. I do see one more hand up, and we do have a few more moments. So sure, Moji, if you would like to share a final thought.
Or I just wanted to share that Professor Richard Falk, I am absolutely honored that he is one of the people who has endorsed the project, the Chambers of Compassion, and along with Professor Noam Chomsky and the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It is so important to understand that all of these issues are deeply, deeply interconnected, intersectional, so that the issues of social justice, this issue of climate catastrophe, the issue of war, the issue of racism, the issue of genocide in the name of Holocaust, all of these are deeply interconnected issues. So in the same way that we have that corporations have chambers of commerce through which they do intersectional systemic collaboration across industry, we as various kinds of activists need to have something that is called the same thing everywhere and does similar kind of systemic collaboration across civil society cause. So I invite everybody to come, and I am going to certainly be listening to Professor Richard Falk. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you again to Jane so much for sharing this incredible work with us, for being with us this evening, and sharing your story and your spirit, and just allowing all of us to spend this time together reflecting on the story of survivors and how we can work to make sure that such an event never happens again. So thank you to everyone. And with that, we will say goodnight. Please feel free to, open some of the links in the chat that may be of relevance to you. And hope to see everyone again soon, continuing to organize for this cause. So thank you again, Jane. Good night.
Thank you, Emily, and everybody else. Guess we get off. Yeah.
Hey, Bill, is everybody gone?
Yes, we have a few people still in the meeting because I wasn't able to end, but we've officially ended. So we're all set.
Okay, I will shut down then.
All right. Thank you, Doreen.
Thanks. Good night.